Hey everyone, it's Justin again. I've heard you've gotten pretty great at plotting points on a coordinate plane. But what happens when we have so many points to plot? We're talking millions, billions, technically infinitely many points. And they all happen to line up like this. Well, instead of plotting each infinitesimally small point separately, we could draw on a line to represent all these points. A line actually lets us represent way more points than we could ever individually draw. This leads me into our topic for today, lines, or more specifically, how to describe them. I'll explain what I mean by this and more in the video, and then we'll do some examples together. Let's get into it. The slope is what we use to describe the direction and steepness of a line. We write the slope as a number. Here are some examples of what a slope could look like. Each of these slopes describes a different line, and by looking at these slopes, we can actually tell which direction each line goes in and how steep they are. Let me explain what direction and steepness mean first, and then we'll come back to these exact same slopes again and analyze them based on those two characteristics. First, let's talk about the direction of a line on a coordinate plane. When we determine the direction of a line, we have to follow along the line from left to right and determine if the line is going up or down. Since we're looking from left to right, we'll follow our line in this direction. On this line, when we travel from left to right, we are also going down, meaning this line has a negative slope. And on this line, as we travel from left to right, we're also going up, meaning the slope of this line is positive. Negative slopes have a negative sign in front of them. So they are to the left of 0 on the number line, like -3/4 and -9/2. And positive slopes will contain numbers to the right of 0 on the number line, like +1/2 or +7. Next, let's talk about the steepness of a line. When we think of steepness, we can relate it to walking up a hill. Walking up this hill probably wouldn't be too tough because the hill isn't very steep. The same is true if we walk up the other side of this hill. That's why these two lines have the same steepness, even though one of them has a positive slope and the other one has a negative slope. This is why we think of steepness separately from the direction. Two slopes with different direction, one being positive and the other negative, can have the same steepness. We could think of different steepnesses as how difficult it would be to walk up a hill. This hill wouldn't be too tough, but notice that as the hill gets steeper and steeper, it would become much more difficult for Mia to walk all the way up it. That's why we can say that the steepness of these lines is increasing as the hill gets higher and higher. When you see this concept of steepness come up, remember that you can relate it to this hill concept and conceptually think about which line would be more difficult to walk up. And remember that a positive and negative slope can still have the same steepness. So what does this mean for the actual numbers we use to represent slope? Well, the steeper a line is, the farther the value of the slope is away from 0 on the number line. Slopes close to 0, like maybe 1/2 or -3/4, would be less steep than slopes farther away from 0, like -9/2 or +7. We already know from talking about direction that negative slopes contain a negative sign. So more specifically, we could say that as we go farther to the left, away from 0, we have steeper negative slopes. And as we go farther away from 0 to the right, we have steeper positive slopes. So what does this look like in actual problems you'll be finding the answers to? Well, we're going to do an example together that is about comparing lines based on their direction and steepness. This problem says, fill in the blanks to write an accurate description of lines C and B. We have 3 blanks to fill in. Take a moment to read through this statement and then try to figure out what would be an appropriate word for each blank. Pause the video now. I'll give you a hint. These are the types of words we're looking for. Let's focus on that first blank. Line C has a blank slope. Is line C's slope positive or negative? Yeah, from left to right, it's going up, so it's a positive slope. Let's fill in for the next blank. What kind of slope does line B have? From left to right, this line is going down, meaning it has a negative slope. Okay, there's only one more blank to fill in, and this is where we'll compare the steepness of the lines. Is line C less steep or more steep than line B? You could ask yourself, would line C be easier or harder to walk up than line B? I can imagine Mia trying to walk up line C and it doesn't seem very steep. But walking up line B would be more like a climb than a walk. It would be very tough because line B is a lot steeper. So what word would you use to fill in this blank? We need the word less, so this line says line C is less steep than line B. Now that you've taken notes on this lesson's video, it's time to complete the additional practice in your PDF for this lesson, and then complete the practice game. Then you'll move on to our next lesson where you'll learn how to actually calculate the slope of a line in a coordinate plane. All the logic and reasoning skills you're practicing in this lesson will really come in handy, because you'll be able to use that same logic to make sure your answers are reasonable and to avoid making silly mistakes. Have fun with your practice, and I'll see you next time.